Hello, my name is Anne-Marie Bonneau. I write the blog, The Zero Waste Chef, and I've written a book of the same title. And I'm just going to tell you how that book came to be. So 10 years ago, I started reading about plastic pollution in the oceans. I knew plastic was bad, but I recycled. So I thought, well, the things I'm putting in my bin are being turned into other things. And then I found out that a lot of the stuff is ending up in the oceans. It's affecting wildlife. Once you see the pictures of the albatrosses feeding plastic to their young, you can't unsee those pictures. And I just thought it was so heartbreaking. And, I was disgusted. So I told my older daughter, at the time, Mary Catherine was 16. She's on the left. I said, we have to get off plastic. And Charlotte on the right, she was only 10, so she didn't really have much to say about it. But Mary Catherine said, okay, great, let's do it. So we were going to quit plastic. And we went to the grocery store for our first trip on our plastic-free journey. And we saw plastic everywhere, because it is everywhere. In the produce section, bagged salads, clam shells with berries, even the cauliflower. I cannot get a cauliflower in a grocery store here that does not have plastic around it. Cucumbers, lots of stuff in plastic. Let's see, the dairy aisle in the back. So milk and plastic, even the paper cartons, those are lined with plastic. Same with juice, those paper cartons are lined with plastic. The very worst part, though, are the center aisles of the store. That's where all the highly processed food is, and that's all packaged in plastic. So I remember standing in the bathroom tissue aisle. I couldn't even get a roll of bathroom tissue without plastic. And I looked at Mary Catherine and I threw my hands up in the air and I said, how are we ever going to do this? This is going to be impossible. I can't even get a roll of bathroom tissue. So Mary Catherine started to do a bunch of research. She found Beth Terry's blog, My Plastic Free Life, and we started to do some of the stuff that Beth Terry wrote about. And one of those things was a plastic audit. So Mary Catherine started collecting all of the plastic that we brought into our home, and she took pictures of it. She did that with an iPhone 2S. That's why these pictures are all blurry. So that's how long we've been doing this. And here are some of her photos. Lots of, let's see. There are some plastic yogurt tubs, plastic utensils. There's a styrofoam clamshell in there, which I hope have been banned since. I have to look that up. Plastic bags for frozen fruit. Bottom left, there are some snack wrappers and a clamshell, typical stuff. Looks like some lotion in the bottom center. There's a big jug for vinegar on the right, which was like the holy grail to figure out. But I did come up with a solution to that. So if you do an audit, I think you'll find similar results, that a lot of the single-use plastic is food packaging. And in fact, there was an article in The Guardian, not even a month ago, and said the top 4 plastic items in the ocean are related to food packaging. So this is what it looks like now. And this took months. So I bought some lunch bots for Charlotte's lunches. She was still little. I didn't want her to take glass jars to school. We started to drink milk from returnable, refillable glass bottles, and we started drinking less milk. Fruit, I buy fruit at the farmer's market, and I freeze it on cookie sheets. Once it's frozen, I transfer it to jars, put the jars in the freezer, so that takes care of the frozen fruit. I don't remember buying liquid soap, but naked soap is a really easy switch. And I think it's more economical because liquid soap, you're paying for water. So that's an easy switch. It's pretty easy to find naked soap. The bottom middle, now, those are that's some sugar from the bulk bin. Bulk bins, which has been a little tricky during COVID. I'm not sure what it's been like up in Oregon, but I'm in Northern California, and most of the bulk bins closed down. The one store I went to, they were allowing me to bring in my jars, and I did that for at least a couple of months. And one day I went in and a different salesperson waited on me. We weren't allowed to open the bins ourselves. So I would hand them my jars, and someone different waited on me one day and said, "You can't bring your jars." And I said, "But I have been." And he's, "Well, you're not supposed to." So then he would put the stuff in paper bags. And then everybody seemed to get the memo, because after that was always paper bags. And I would put those in the compost. On the bottom right, that is my homemade scrap vinegar that I make from apple peels and cores or pineapple scraps. And my blog is zerowastechef.com, and I have all this stuff up there. And I just finished a post. Like, I hit publish right before I got on here. I made white wine vinegar. It tastes fabulous. I'm so excited by it. Anyway, if you're interested in vinegar, you can go and check that out. I just posted it. So Charlotte never complained much, but she did say this to Mary Cat at one point. "Why have you done this?" Mary Catherine was really into it, and she actually now works in waste management. So I tell people, if you want to reduce your waste, start with food. Even if you're a hardcore minimalist that owns a backpack with 12 items and nothing else in the world, you still need to eat. So we'll talk about where to shop, what to buy, and how to buy it. Now, there's an excellent place to shop. It's the most economical place you can go, and it's also the closest to you, and that is your refrigerator. Before I go to the store, I look at what I have on hand. I look at the perishable stuff. So my refrigerator and my fruit and vegetables, and then I think of what I can make with what I have on hand. Most of us, when we were taught how to cook, if we were taught how to cook, we were told, okay, pick a recipe that looks good, write down all the ingredients, go to the store, buy the ingredients, bring them home, do the cooking, eat the meal, put the leftovers in the refrigerator. So you have not only the leftover dish, but all of the little bits and pieces. And if you do that a few times a week, you have all of this stuff in your refrigerator, and some of it is probably going to end up not being eaten. So check the refrigerator first, and your fruit and vegetables. If you garden, go see what's growing in the garden. I probably don't need to tell you that if you're gardening. You already know that. Oh, this is a rogue kabocha squash in the compost. I love the rogue vegetables. We have potatoes in the compost right now. So we'll see how those turn out. I freeze all kinds of food. So after I've looked at the refrigerator and the garden, then I'll look in the freezer. I use wide mouth jars to freeze food, and I leave enough headspace for liquid so that when they expand, the jars don't break. And no, I don't use jars with necks, because those can break off. Even if you think you've left enough space, you may not have them. They can still break. It happened to me once. It's the type of thing that happens only once. So I freeze apple peels and cores. That's in the top left. That's what I use to make my scrap vinegar. So the bacteria and yeast, they ferment and make the vinegar. And you can freeze the peels and cores, and the microbes just take a nap in the freezer. It still works with frozen, previously frozen peels and cores. I have tofu, frozen homemade tofu in the top, kind of that big jar on the top row. And it has a really nice texture after you freeze it. If you've never tried it, it's nice and chewy and really, really good. Next to that is some bean broth. I save all the broth from beans that I cook in my pressure cooker, which cuts the cooking time, just slashes it. But that's black bean broth, and I put that in my, lately, I've been putting it in my sourdough discard vegan chocolate cake. So instead of water, I'll put black bean broth if I have it. My recipe calls for water. It's really good. Tomatoes, I freeze lots of tomatoes. When the price drops later on in the summer, I buy cases of them. I get dry farmed Early Girls, and they have a lot of flavor because they're under distress. The farmers water them when they plant them, and then they don't water them again, and so they're kind of small and have really intense sweet flavor. They're so good. So I roast those, often with crushed garlic. nothing else, no olive oil or anything. Just stick them in the oven on low temperature and then freeze them. And then I have tomatoes all through winter because the canned tomatoes are lined with plastic. All canned food all has a plastic lining. And so I want to avoid that. Oh, and I mean, this tastes really good. Tastes, so I warn people that, oh no, what have I done? Sorry. Technical difficulties. Yeah, I warn people, if you try this, try the tomatoes, you don't want to go back. They're really tasty. So those are some of the things I freeze. All right, then I check the pantry, see what I have in the pantry. I might have some bread, maybe some bread that's starting to go stale. That's great for breadcrumbs, which you can put in all kinds of food. This week I did a cook along and we made vegetable pancakes and put breadcrumbs in them. Mystery grains. Mystery grains are great to throw into soup. You might have a 1/4 cup of rice and you probably don't want to turn on the oven for 20 minutes to boil a 1/4 cup of rice. Throw it into soup, or in my book, I have a recipe for dosas. You could soak that if you have, and you need dal, lentils, sorry. You soak those and make dosas. They're fermented, and I'm obsessed with fermentation, so I'll get to that. So check those mystery grains. Now, if you do that, if you look at what you have on hand before you go to the grocery store, you will absolutely slash your food waste. So that food is going to dictate what's for dinner. And cooking like that has made me a much more creative cook. And the reason we want to do that is, well, there are many reasons, but to reduce the amount of food that's going uneaten. So 1/3 of the food we produce in the world goes uneaten. In the US, it's even higher. It's up to nearly 40%. It's dropped a little bit in the last few years. So high 30s, you know, it's crazy. It's a crazy problem. Not only does the food go to waste, but all of the resources that went into growing the food. So the labor, the land that's cleared of trees that were sequestering greenhouse gases, chemical inputs onto food that goes uneaten, you know, but you know, it's terrible for the soil. The water, we don't have any, and the energy, did I mention the energy? So all of that is going to waste. And last year in the US, nearly 54, at the end of 2020, when this was sort of the peak, nearly 54 million Americans faced food insecurity. And we're throwing out all of that food. So it's really kind of it's terrible, absurd problem. This is according to the UN. The UN came out with a food waste index this year in March. Wasted food accounts for from 8 to 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. And the airline, to put that into context, the airline industry accounts for 2.5%, and that's according to Project Drawdown, which if you haven't checked out, I highly recommend. It's a website, projectdrawdown.org, I believe, and a fabulous book. And it will really give you hope about the climate crisis because we have the tools right now to do something about it. All right, after you've shopped at home, then I go to the farmer's market. I'm completely spoiled. We have fabulous farmer's markets around here. I'm sure it's the same up where you are. I imagine your farmer's markets are great. And then I go to the bulk stores or bulk store. There's only one I can go to now. Well, there's one up in San Francisco that's fabulous, but I don't get up there that often. And there is a grocery store near me that does have quite a bit of naked produce, but I buy almost all of my stuff from the farmer's market. And the food tastes fabulous, but also you're cutting out the middleman. So there was an article in The Guardian last week about the problem with the monopoly in the American food system. So about 4 multinationals own or control 79% of typical grocery items at a grocery store. So my farmer's market, even the smaller one I go to that has what, a few dozen vendors, that has more consumer choice than the typical grocery store. And the farmers, they get about 90% of our dollar when we buy from them. They get about 15 cents of a dollar at a grocery store. So, okay, what to buy? So that depends on what you found at home. What can you make with what you found? Do you need anything else to make it? Plan one or maybe two other meals. This is what I call meal planning light. I mean, if you like to get out the spreadsheets and make a really detailed meal plan, do that. Do whatever works for you. I'm just telling you what I do. What will you do with any leftover ingredients? Then make your shopping list and go to the store or farmer's market. So I buy a lot of vegetables, a lot more than I did before. So cutting the plastic really cleaned up my diet. I had no intention of doing that. My diet wasn't horrible, but yeah, just automatically, I could no longer buy the impulse buys at the checkout at Trader Joe's. Once you get the food home, store it to make it last longer. So asparagus, it does really well in a jar of water just on the table. And you can regrow things like green onions. I have basil in the growing that my daughter made pesto, and she, cut all the leaves off or tore all the leaves off, and she just left the stems there. And usually I would compost that. And I thought, no, I've got to do something with this. So I trimmed the ends and I put them in water. And I do this all the time with full sprigs that have leaves on them. But I put the sprigs with nothing on them in water, and roots sprouted, and I planted them, and I've got all this basil now. So that was exciting. Tomatoes, don't store them in the refrigerator because they get mealy and kind of tasteless. Onions and potatoes, they don't get along well, so keep them apart. Keep bananas away from everything unless you want something to ripen faster. So if you want your fruit to ripen faster or an avocado, then put them all together with bananas. And dark leafy greens. When I buy those, if I get them home and I don't deal with them, they're gonna go limp. What I do is I cut them into bite-sized pieces, I wash them, and then I put them in a clean cloth produce bag, and then I go outside and I spin it around my head. I don't have a salad spinner, so that's my salad spinner. It takes up zero space in my tiny kitchen, and it wicks the water away. Not all of it though. The greens are still a little bit damp, and then I put them in the refrigerator, and they keep for a really long time and don't go to waste. And here are some grains, some bagels I bought in my cloth bag, bread. A lot of bakeries have the bread loose. Well, some bakeries have bread loose, and you can bring a clean bag and put it directly in your bag and avoid the plastic. Chickpeas are a zero waste food group. I have some soaking right now behind me. I moved them, okay. I have some soaking in my kitchen. So I'm gonna make chana masala with some of them, and some of them will go into hummus. If I had any left, which I probably won't, but if I did, I would make roasted chickpeas. And these are just some of my bulk spices. How to buy it. Oh, so these are the cloth produce bags I was talking about that I spin around above my head for the salad spinner. I have a group of volunteer sewers, and we haven't been able to get together since last February, but we sew cloth produce bags, super simple, like this woman is holding on the right. We sew them out of donated fabric that people send us, and then we hand them out at the farmer's market. And this woman came back to show us the bags in action from a previous giveaway. And people love these bags. They go crazy. They're just, we don't even put drawstrings on them because the ones at the farmer's market, the plastic ones don't have drawstrings. So, and it slows down the line. So this is a stack of 500 and we have given away, I think about 3,400 bags so far. It would be higher if it wasn't for COVID, but we'll do it again soon. And it's really nice because it reduces some of the plastic right there at the farmer's market. And it also gets people thinking because, you know, they'll start asking us questions, or they'll say things like, you know, I don't want to use all of the plastic, but I didn't know what else to do. Or I have fabric at home and I'm going to make some of these today. And it serves as a gateway to further plastic reduction. So that's how I buy my fruit and vegetables. I've never had a problem at the farmer's market or even the grocery store with anybody, like cashiers have never complained. And occasionally at the farmer's market, last week, one of the farmers put an extra tomato in my bag because she appreciated the effort, I guess. And here is a homemade, one of the volunteers, she made this bag. She only learned to sew at our little sewing bees. And then she made this beautiful bag. It has a flat bottom. It's really nice. And lined too. And then my jars, which I take to the bulk store. So you take those, depending on the store, customer service will weigh them and they'll mark the weight so that you don't pay for the weight of the jar. Some stores, they'll have the scales out and you'll weigh the jar yourself. So that's how I buy my stuff. Now, if you don't have access to bulk bins or the bulk bins are closed during COVID, if it makes sense, buy the biggest package of food if your family will eat it. So if you can easily go through 25 pounds of rice, then buy the 25-pound bag. It's what's going in the bulk bins anyway. Some of the bulk stores do a really good job of recycling those materials though, but you know, they're not growing the rice out in the parking lot. So that's a 50-pound bag of rye flour. And okay, nobody's gonna buy the thing on the end. That's a barrel of olive oil. It costs $4,000, but I just want to give some examples of mega bulk shopping. Oh, how I cook. So the way I cook has changed since I started down this road. And I cook like grandma now, or great grandma, depending on how old you are. I've been making sourdough bread since before everybody started making it last year. I ferment everything, and the way I cook, I call it freestyle cooking. So this was my last in-person sourdough, or one of my last in-person sourdough classes last year. And so the starter, it just contains flour and water, and you nurture it and it fills up with bacteria and yeast, and then you have to take care of it and feed it all the time. And so I started making sourdough because when I went plastic free, I didn't want to buy the yeast packets anymore because I had baked bread since Mary Catherine was baby. And I knew I had an inkling. I knew that I could make it with wild yeast, but I didn't really know how to do it. So maybe I never would have looked into it if I hadn't cut the plastic. I, you know, have made all kinds of discoveries, like great discoveries along this journey. So I started making sourdough bread. And then last year during COVID, the numbers on my stats on my blog for sourdough just started to go crazy. And people were tagging me on Instagram of all of their sourdough starters, their new starters and their names. And I thought, wow, what's going on? And then I realized, oh, the commercial yeast was all gone from the stores. So, and here's a loaf of sourdough on the right, and that is just flour, water, and yeast. Sorry, flour, water, and salt. Because the starter that I put in it is also just flour and water. So 3 ingredients, 1 that I get from the tap, and you get this awesome bread. Oh, and by the way, I'm teaching a free online sourdough starter class next Tuesday on the 27th, if anybody's interested in that. You can find that on my blog. Oh, my grain mill. Now, if you really get into baking sourdough, and well, anyway, yeah, well, let me back up. Okay, if you really get into baking sourdough, you may want to get a grain mill. I grind up some of my flour. This is a hand mill. I also have an electric mill that a neighbor gave to me, which is, it's beautiful. It's this vintage wooden case with stones in it to grind the flour. Anyway, so you buy wheat berries, which you can buy at a lot of bulk bins. They're really common. I didn't know that until I started looked into grinding flour. So these are soft wheat berries in the middle jar, and then that is some of my flour. Now it's really delicious and it's more nutritious because you have the whole kernel. You have the oils and all of the nutrients that are stripped out of the flour to make it shelf stable. You have to use it right away though, once you grind it, because the oils turn rancid soon after. And that's why the oils aren't in the store-bought, they're shelf stable stuff. But you don't have to go all Little Red Hen. You don't have to plant the seed to grow the wheat, to harvest the grain, to grind up the flour, to bake the bread. You can just buy the bread. But this is fun if you're interested. Fermentation. So I'm obsessed with fermentation. I ferment all the things. Not only does it taste fabulous, it prevents food waste. So these lemons sitting on the counter here, if I just left them and didn't do anything with them in the picture, those would turn soft and furry and I'd have to compost them. But if I ferment them, if I make preserved lemons, they'll last for a year, more than a year. I have a jar just with, oh no, you know what? I just used it last week. I put it in hummus. So it was over a year old. It was a little quarter of a preserved lemon in one jar. It's all I had left. It was delicious. And it had so much flavor. Same with the kimchi on the left. If I had a glut of Napa cabbage for some reason and I didn't get to it, it would just turn into a puddle. But here it's preserved for several months. I eat it pretty quickly, but it keeps for a long time. That on the left is hibiscus soda that I make with a ginger bug, which is another kind of starter. It's just ginger, sugar, and water. And you add it to a sweetened drink, and the bacteria and yeast in the starter, they eat the sugars and they excrete acids and carbon dioxide, and that makes the drink fizzy. So, because when we went plastic free, well, not that I drank a lot of soda, but sometimes you kind of want a carbonated drink. And so I had to figure out, well, how do I make that? On the right, that's kombucha. That one is watermelon flavored. And freestyle cooking. So that's what I call how I cook now. So I look in the fridge and I see, okay, what can I make? These are the makings of ratatouille. You can't see the tomatoes. Here are some examples. I make pumpkin puree for pumpkin pie out of a whole sugar pie pumpkin. I'll either roast it or cook it in my pressure cooker really quickly. And I had some leftover puree, so I made some pasta with it. And then on the right, that is fennel frond pesto. At the farmer's market, a lot of the vendors, a lot of vendors who have fennel, they chop off the fronds, the stalks and the fronds, because customers don't want those parts, and they give them away for free. So I get that part of the pesto for free, and then I add usual pesto stuff. I add parsley and olive oil and garlic and nuts and nutritional yeast or cheese if you eat cheese. Oh, this is my homemade tofu. So the only problem with making tofu is you get all of this okara, the leftover soybean pulp. I would make tofu more often, except you get a lot of it. And I have to use it up. I can't just toss it. So the easiest way to use it up is to throw it into homemade granola, and it tastes really good. I recently dried a bunch out and used it like breadcrumbs because it's kind of grainy, like it's not fine, but it's more like, yeah, more like breadcrumbs. Or I'll make biscotti with it. I drink a lot of tea, so much tea, and I love biscotti. It's a real treat. Oh, cleanup. So cleanup, I don't use anything harsh. Mostly just, this is my bar soap. It's dishwashing block. And these are kind of expensive, but they last a really long time. I use that to wash dishes. And if you put it on a little homemade dish of that you make with rubber bands, it will last even longer because the bottom doesn't go soggy. So this one, I remember I got that in December and I just finished using it, I think in May. It lasted for a really long time. There's my vinegar again, vinegar and baking soda. I use that to clean so much. I have this rule I try to follow. Don't eat anything you wouldn't put down this. Sorry, don't clean with anything. No, sorry. Don't eat anything you wouldn't put down the sink. Compost. Compost is really important. I didn't even mention this with the food waste. Did I? It's compacted in landfill and it releases greenhouse gases. So same thing with food waste, or sorry, food scraps. So food scraps belong in the compost. And if you do it properly, it won't smell. It will actually smell fabulous. It's got this nice earthy smell. If you live in an apartment or you don't have a space outside to compost, you can try vermicompost indoors. Your city might have community gardens that accept food scraps. There's an app called Share Waste, and there aren't a lot of people on it, depending on where you live. Down here where I am, in my neighborhood, there are maybe 3 people. So what it is, Share Waste, it's like Tinder for food scraps. So you look for someone who's looking for some hot food scraps, and or if you're accepting food scraps to your compost, you can list your compost bin. And so those are some ideas if you can't compost outside. Secondhand first. So we're at peak stuff. There's just so much stuff. And during COVID, people have been purging like crazy. So if you need something, I find if I'm patient and I need something, I'm usually able to find it often on the side of the road, because I live in Silicon Valley, and I mean, you just would not believe what people put on the curb here. It's crazy. But the thrift shops too. Lots of good stuff in the thrift shops. Oh, so this table and the sort of rectangular boxy chairs, those I bartered with someone, and I wanted some chairs to match. And I vocalized that one day. I told my family, I'd like 2 more chairs to go with my table. And I think within 2 weeks, it was a really short time, I found the 2 chairs on the end on the street. They were Ethan Allen chairs, just sitting there with a free sign. So buy quality, not too much, mostly used. That's a riff on Michael Pollan's maxim for eating. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. So, okay, so why bother doing all of this? Why not just, as Charlotte one day when she was younger said, live like a normal person? Why can't we live like normal people? So here's a short answer. Okay, but what's in it for me? You may be thinking. But I doubt you're thinking that. But there are a lot of benefits. So taste your food. By placing these parameters on myself, I'm much more creative. I'm a much more creative cook than I used to be, I have to use up everything. And so I can't just go out and buy a bunch of stuff. I've got to think about what I can do. These crackers on the left, those are sourdough crackers. They're really, really good. They kind of taste like a little bit like Cheez-Its, but contain no cheese. It's just that the starter is super tangy. And so they have this cheesy flavor and they're crunchy. We tried to make crackers when we first went plastic free and they were okay. They're kind of more like flatbread. But the sourdough starter, you can roll it out nice and thinly. It's just nice dough to work with, and you get crunchy actual crackers. Those are my roasted chickpeas that I mentioned earlier. So that's a nice snack. Healthy gut. So I eat all of that fermented stuff. I try to eat a little bit of fermented food every day, and my gut loves me. And I tell people results may vary, but I don't catch colds or get the flu. So everybody's different, but before I started this, I always caught everything. So I have a much healthier gut. Now, to get the most out of fermented foods, you also have to eat a lot of fiber. So eat fermented foods and vegetables, and your gut will be very happy. Oh, I saved money. So I tell people overall, this is a package deal. Some of the things I buy do cost more. I pay more for my food than if I shopped at like a discount grocery store, but I don't waste any of that food. The average family of 4 in the US spends about $1,800 on food that goes uneaten. And I don't buy stuff. I talk about secondhand. I have secondhand pants on right now. My Birkenstocks that I'm wearing, because of course I wear Birkenstocks. I've had these repaired 3 times. It wasn't inexpensive to get them repaired, but it was much less than 2 new pairs. No, wait, yeah, had them repaired 3 times. Yeah, 3 new pairs. So overall, I saved a lot of money. Oh, but this is the best reason. Rebel status. So 3 years ago, almost to the day, I was in the San Jose Mercury News. And of course I knew it was going to be in the paper because a reporter came over and interviewed me, and her photographer came, and they spent quite a bit of time, but I didn't know when the article was going to come out. And then one day a friend texted me and said, "Great article in the Mercury." And I texted back, "Oh, is it in there? I'm afraid to read it. I don't want to read what they wrote." And she texted back, "No, it's good." And she sent the link. So I read it and I thought, "Oh, that's good." And I shared it on Facebook and Instagram and went about my day. And then I thought in the afternoon, oh, I wonder if it's in the print edition, because sometimes these things are only online. They don't make it to the print edition, like with magazines. Sometimes the stuff's just online. So I went over to the grocery store in the afternoon, and I had this same shirt on that I have on in the picture. And I was wandering around the store and looking for the papers, and I saw a stack of them. And I saw I was on the front page above the fold, and I was shocked. And I remember I just gasped. And I stood there for a long time, just staring at all of these papers, staring at myself in the paper. And I thought, wow, like thousands of people get this paper. And I kind of calmed down, and I grabbed my paper and I went to the cash register, and there was a woman in front of me, but there was space on the conveyor belt. So I put my paper down, and she turned to look, like, what's she buying? And she saw the paper, and she took her hand and she swatted it. And she said, "Oh, that woman." She said, "She's so extreme." And again, I gasped. I just put my hands up to my face and I went, "Ooh." And she said, I read the whole article, and I commend her for what she's doing, but she's so extreme." And then I think I just started laughing, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, is that you?" So I think it's great, the media coverage, and that people want to learn about all of this. But how did it become front page news? How did we get here? I eat a lot of vegetables. I ride my bike all over, and I don't buy stuff I don't need. But now that's front page news. Oh. Okay, now if you're feeling overwhelmed, Plastic Free July is still going strong. If you want to cut the Plastic Free July website suggests you cut the top 4, and those are 4 items that are super common and also easily replaced. So plastic bags, shopping bags and produce bags, which I mentioned, plastic water bottles, you know, a lot of them water bottles are just filled with tap water, filtered tap water, but you also ingest plastic when you drink out of a plastic bottle. You drink, there are microplastics in there. To-go coffee cups. You can take your mug to the cafe or find a cafe that has real mugs, or brew your coffee or tea at home and put it in the thermos and take it with you. And the 4th thing is straws. And a lot of people criticize the straw bans and they say, oh, it's just a straw. But it's not a straw, because anybody who cares about plastic pollution does not end with a straw. They're not going to say, I've cut straws, I'm done. They're going to go on and they're going to cut other things. And also, we do use huge billions and billions of straws. So, and of course, if you need a straw, you should be able to get a straw. Nobody's advocating for people who have disabilities to go without straws. So, but for a lot of people, they can use a reusable straw or just, you know, drink, just put the cup up to their mouths. Oh, and here, so this took us months to cut the waste. I remember we had just adopted kittens when we decided to do this, and that was in the spring. And at Thanksgiving, I remember my daughter and I saying, oh my God, we've got to do plastic-free Thanksgiving. How are we going to do this? So it took months. And I think this chart shows that's more important that everybody does something. So let's say there are 10,000 of you on this Zoom call right now. And you've listened to me and you want to cut your waste. I think maybe 1% will cut all of the waste. I figure that if that many people are going to do it, they're going to get down to 0. And the average for every American, about 4.5 pounds of garbage is generated every day. So 1% of 10,000 people cutting all of their waste is about 160,000 pounds of waste in 1 year. Let's say a quarter of you decide to cut a quarter of your waste. Well, then it's a little over 1 million pounds of waste in a year. How about everybody cuts 10%? It doesn't sound like very much. 10% does not sound like a lot. That's over 1.6 million pounds. So, and 10% is doable, I think, for most people. And the thing is, you're not going to stop at 10% likely. A lot of people will go on and they'll cut more because they realize all of those benefits that I mentioned. And those are just some of the benefits. And that's it. My book is out, available where you borrow or buy books. And thank you, Beaverton City Library. Thank you all for coming. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. That was great.
Oh, thanks, Bethany.
We're going to let people unmute themselves, and then if anybody has questions, you can unmute yourself and ask them.
I see some questions in the chat, or maybe they aren't questions. I see some comments. And oh no, those are, oh, thank you. Thank you for putting those links.
So there are links there to Anne-Marie's blog and also a link to her book in the library catalog. So if you'd like to put a hold on it, there's a waiting list, and also some other books about the zero waste movement, if you're interested. So if anybody has questions, you can type them in the chat and I can read them, or you can unmute yourself and ask away. I guess I have a question if no one else
Oh, okay,
does.
great.
You mentioned storing bread in a bag. Is there a certain fabric that works really well? Because I make a lot of homemade bread, but it
Oh, you do?
doesn't keep very long.
Yeah, it doesn't. So I use those produce bags. We try to use natural fabrics. We ask people to send us natural fabrics because synthetics, they shed microplastic in the washing machine. So I store my bread in usually cotton bags, sometimes linen if I have them. But yeah, it does keep longer in plastic. I can't lie. But there there are all sorts of toxins. Like it's not just the waste. It's the stuff that plastic is made of. And it pollutes all along its life cycle. But so when I freeze bread, I freeze it whole in one of those produce bags, and that works really well. I don't slice it because then the edges get kind of freezer burn. They dry out and get kind of funky. Um, and on the counter, so I make sourdough and it stays fresh longer. I think that hard crust helps. But yeah, just in a cloth produce bag. So I made sourdough bread today. Well, I made the dough. I'm baking. Let's see if I can stay awake until 10. I could bake it at 10 because I'm doing a cold proof and I have to leave it in there for at least 8 hours. Or I'll get up at 5 and bake. And then when I slice it, I just turn it, slice the slice side down on my wooden cutting board, and just keep it like that. And we eat it pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you. We do have a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll read those. The first one is, if you eat meat, what is the best way of purchasing it without involving plastic?
So I'm an omnivore, but I don't eat that much meat because, well, I don't eat that much meat. So when I do eat it, or if I do buy it, I want to buy rotationally grazed, pasture raised. And there was a store here, Bel Campo. I don't know if they're just in California or if they're in Oregon. Anyway, it was right here, and I could bring my own containers. And the animals, they lived on the same farm their whole lives. And then they had what Michael Pollan says is one very bad day. So, but that's gone. I don't know why. I think it's still in LA and San Francisco, but it's not here. So I would take my containers in. And the first time I tried it, this was several years ago, I took my containers in and I asked, will you put the food in my container? And the guy said, no. He said, no, I'm not doing that. It's against health codes, blah, 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 which isn't true. Anyway, he was showing off in front of I could just tell. He was just like doing a power trip to show off in front of the person he was working with. And I said, are you the manager? And he said, no. So I went back and they let me do it. Actually, sorry, I emailed the company first and said, can I do that? And they said, absolutely. So I just took my containers in and they would fill them. But now they're gone. So you can do that. And if you put them, so I didn't throw out all of the plastic when we started to do this, which my daughter, because she's only a teenager and, like more influenced by advertising, she would come to me all the time. Oh, we need to buy this now. Now that we've cut the plastic, I saw such and such online. We need to buy that. And then I told her, we can't shop our way out of global warming. Well, let's just use what we have. So I still have it, a big Tupperware container with a square one with a plastic lid. And that was really good for taking to that store. And they would tear it so that you don't pay for the weight of that and just put the meat in there. But that's hard to find. So I rarely eat meat now.
Another question that's kind of related, how do you navigate buying takeout food?
Yeah, that's hard too. The same thing, you can take a container, but it depends. During COVID, it's been harder. So, so I'm working on this. I'm really excited about this. And if any of you want to do this up there, I'm going to write a blog post about it. So I'm from Canada, near Toronto, and I spoke up there last year. It was my last talk before COVID. And I spoke to this group called Roncy Reduces. There's a neighborhood in Toronto called Roncesvalles. Everybody calls it Roncy. So this woman, she has 3 kids, and she told me, you know, she was horrified by all of the garbage they were producing, all of the recycling, she said, you know, it was just piling up, and she wanted to do something about it. And she had heard Bea Johnson speak. She wrote Zero Waste Home. And yeah, so she wanted to do something. She approached a couple of stores, a couple of businesses, a bulk store and maybe a cafe. And she had stickers made that said, they were a circle. And in the center where there was a graphic of reusable containers and a mug. And across the top, it said, bring your own. And across the bottom, it said, Roncy Reduces. So she approached these businesses that were already allowing that. She said, can you put this sticker in your window to indicate to people like us that we can shop there? Like, it's brilliant. And then she approached other businesses. She had friends help her approach other businesses. And they'd say, you know, would you consider allowing people to bring their own containers and put this sticker in the window? So they started that in 2019. By the time I went to speak to their group, they had over 70 businesses who had put the sticker in their window. Some of them stopped during COVID, but some continued. That's one neighborhood in Toronto. Then it spread to 17 other neighborhoods in Toronto. So hundreds of businesses. So I want to do the same thing here, and I have my sticker design. And so now I'm working on that. And that would go over in Portland from what I know of Portland. Like, it would be perfect. So yeah, so if any of you, you can look out for my blog post on zerowastechef.com saying how to do it, or go to canadareduces.ca and you can read about how to do it. Like, it's so simple. And because I've been doing this for 10 years, and even to this day, I mean, especially during COVID, I'm still a little bit nervous. You know, I have to like breathe before I say, please put my sandwich here. Because it's a little nerve-wracking. But if you have that sticker in a bunch of windows, the one cafe I used to go to here, I used to, you know, take my laptop and go work there because there were no distractions. They just suspended their bring your own cup, I think, indefinitely. I don't think they're bringing it back. So I haven't been there in over a year. So I found a new place. But anyway, that was a really long answer.
I think I read too that you can, if you do DoorDash or one of those types of deliveries, you can request no plastic silverware in the notes. I think I read that somewhere. I haven't used that service.
Yeah, in some areas have forced them to do that. DoorDash and Uber Eats, that they have to say utensils only upon request. You're getting the food delivered to your home. You have a fork. I don't understand just why they keep putting, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I really got a lot out of this. And if you want to know more, I did put the link to the blog in the chat, and we are recording this, so it will go up on the Beaverton City Library's YouTube channel at some point in time. So you'll be able to watch it again if you want to review what we talked about here. But thank you so much, Anne Marie, for your time and your knowledge and expertise. And
oh, thank you, Bethany. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. And thank you everyone for coming.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Have a good night.